Good evening, everybody, and happy belated Christmas. Welcome to the 169th episode of Stories of Service, Ordinary People Who Do Extraordinary Work. I'm the host, and today I have a very special guest and something I've never had on a podcast, which is a Navy SEAL who is now a lawyer and is now also an advocate. Bill, how are you doing today?
It's an honor to be on your show, Teresa. Thank you so much.
Well, it is an honor to be on this show with you. I've gotten to know you a little bit better over the past couple of weeks. We've been on some shows together, and thanks to Suzanne Lesko for introducing us. I am just in all of your work and everything that you're doing. Before we get started, I'm just going to play a brief intro to this episode and to Stories of Service for any people who don't already familiar with the podcast. I'm going to start using my dad's voiceover directly onto the show. So you may have to turn your sound up for this. We noticed it when we tested it with my husband that you might have to do that, but here we go.
From the moment we're born and lock eyes with our parents, we are inspiring others. By showing up as a vessel of service, we not only help others, we help ourselves. Welcome to S.O.S, Stories of Service, hosted by Teresa Carpenter. Hear from ordinary people from all walks of life who have transformed their communities by performing extraordinary work.
There we go. And today, as I said, we're talking to Bill Brown. He is an Iraq veteran Navy SEAL who served honorably for 8 years, completing 3 deployments, and one of those was to Iraq. And today we're going to talk about that journey from the battlefield to higher education, where he was able to take advantage of the GI Bill to attend Rutgers University and Rutgers Law School. And now he works alongside renowned military and veteran attorney Tim Parlatore at Parlatore Law Group, LLP, where he advocates for the rights and well-being of service members and veterans. He is also the founder and driving force behind the New York City SEAL Swim, an inspiring event that has raised millions of dollars to support Gold Star families, Navy SEALs, and their loved ones. And today we're going to talk about the mission behind the swim, the impact it's had, and what motivates him to keep on giving back to the SEAL community. And we're also going to be talking about his very recent advocacy for Pete Hegseth. So join us today as we're going to be talking about leadership, legacy, and service beyond the battlefield. Welcome.
Great to be here.
So first off, I always ask my guests who are serving in the military, who have served in the military, where were you born and raised, and what made you decide to become a Navy SEAL?
I was born in Voorhees, New Jersey. I was raised in a bunch of different river towns outside Philly in Jersey. I come from a strong military family, like a lot of military members and veterans. Both of my grandfathers served. My one grandfather, Gerald Bridges, was a World War II veteran in the Navy. My other grandfather, Bill Brown, he was an Army veteran who served during the Korean War but didn't go to Korea. My dad served in the Air Force during the Vietnam War, but he didn't go to Vietnam. I think I always thought that I should serve our country. I always kind of had that kind of like pull and the Navy. I was a pretty rough and tumble guy, and the Navy 100% saved my life. I got to see the world, have a lot of adventures, really expanded my horizons by serving with a lot of very oriented and focused and talented individuals, and also had a lot of fun too, and a lot of adventures. I would honestly say the best and worst times in my life were probably in the Navy.
Now, in your childhood, were you sort of a rebellious person that you at first didn't think that you were going to make your life because in the Navy, and especially because you joined the hardest job in the United States Navy? Was that at first or?
No, what happened with me was I originally just wanted to I wanted to serve my country, but I wanted to get a trade.
Right.
And so I went in to be an electrician to me. And it being a SEAL wasn't as high profile as it is now. And to be sincere, I've never even heard of the SEAL teams at the time until I was actually in boot camp. And the first week, because I was enlisted, And the first week you weren't allowed to, or the first 2 weeks you weren't allowed to talk when you ate. And they had the TVs on in the galley, and they had a thing that would come on there every once in a while. And it was these guys in these fast boats jumping out of airplanes, running through the obstacle course. And I thought, oh, wow, that looks kind of cool. And then they had a couple guys come into the our boot camp division and kind of say you could try out. And one of the things I did in boot camp on my own with a couple other guys, anyhow, is I would work out late at night in the bathroom, and I do pull ups off the bathroom stalls and push ups there because everybody else was sleeping, and it was a good way for me to get a workout and kind of purge the kind of like frustration that everybody kind of has with boot camp. And so I tried out. I failed the screening test the first 3 times, but no one said you couldn't keep coming back. So nobody in my boot camp division passed either, but I was the only guy that kept coming back. And there was one of the dive motivators, I believe his name was Chief Zen, went out of his way to teach me the last time I went, and actually taught me a modified breaststroke. And then the next time I went to do it, like the whole time he went out of his way, gave me one-on-one instruction. And that was really all I needed because I was fairly close to passing. And then the next time and that was how I winded up inadvertently, becoming involved with that community.
Wow, it's so interesting. Everybody that I talk to that goes into something hard or does something challenging like you did, they always tell me that there's that one person or those people who believed in them. And even if it was hard fought to get there, there was that person or that leadership that was infused within you to keep on going. And then your own determination that you weren't going to let the times that you didn't get it be what would stop you from eventually achieving that goal.
Yeah, great point. I think I loved how you had your father in the open dialogue, and I think that kind of really reinforces the point you're just making now. It's obvious your father had a big impact on you, and is a big supporter of what you're doing now. Basically being an advocate for service members and veterans and helping us get our stories out there. And yeah, it's the same with me. I think in every endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad is a natural storyteller. He doesn't know a stranger. He, he really doesn't. Like everyone just loves him. And he always emphasized service above self. That was just the motto and the way that he lived his life. And it definitely rubbed off on me. So tell me a little bit about what it was like going through the SEAL training and then eventually getting to your first duty station.
Well, to be sincere with you, it was like getting hit in the hammer with the hammer every day. There's a couple ways to go through, and I think the smartest way is they call it being a gray man. Somebody who meets all the standards, and there's really zero drama attached to them. Maybe they're not the best, but they're never the worst. All right. If the instructor doesn't know your name, that's probably a good thing type of like
Right.
way. Unfortunately, that was never an option for me. Uh, One was I was very aggressive when I was younger. I was very athletic, but I was very aggressive. The other thing about me was too, I had a cleft palate. I took speech lessons for years when I was growing up. So my voice kind of like, made me kind of like stand out. Sometimes it was a lot more pronounced back then than it is now. And so, and the other truth to the matter is, when I grew up pretty rough and tumble, and I went to an Abbott school district, which means such a poor performing school district in New Jersey that it gets extra state funding. And so my priorities coming into it were very skewed. Like I was, I really, I was behind the power curve in some ways. And one of the things too is they taught me some very hard lessons. I know one of the biggest, hardest lessons that they taught me is how important it is to come across as quick on your feet, and I think they got a misread on me in the beginning, and they kind of thought I was a rock. And because they thought I was a rock, and because I had a little bit of an attitude, was probably the last place in the world you would have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, is they came at me pretty hard. And if your listeners, they can read I'm in both of David Goggins' books, and he talks a little bit about, how I got the hammer a little bit in his first book, Can't Hurt Me.
Yeah, you guys went
But
through training together, correct?
yeah, we did. And so so I got I got teed up a little bit, but you want to know what? It was the best place in the world for me because number one, I had a lot of I went through some things when I was younger, this or that. We all kind of have our own crosses to bear, and it was the perfect place for me to like be with other guys that like hard men that I could respect, and at the same time, you see, a lot of times if somebody has a lot of energy or a lot of passion, it can do two things. It can either be a great accelerator or it can just totally blow that person up.
Yes. Well, advocates, I think, naturally have childhood trauma. I do believe that there's this and it can be a good thing where you're able to take that and just drive with it and go further than most people will. Or, like you said, it can go the other side where it just turns into addiction and it turns into all these other harmful behaviors. It's a matter of being able to channel it.
Yes, you're 100% right. You're so right. Yep. And so they helped me channel it. And you got a lot of energy, you got a lot of aggression. You're you want to be a part of something great, and I had a lot of adventure. I always loved adventure. When I think about some of the trouble I got in as a teenager, a lot of it's associated with adventure, and you can definitely have some pretty cool adventures in a SEAL team. So yeah.
Yeah. I was reading the book from Eddie Gallagher, and I think he went into his childhood was very rough and tumble as well, and he had a lot of hard times. But I think it hardened him and it prepared him for this ultimate challenge that he was going to have later on in life, where he almost got put away for the rest of his life, and having to fight back against a corrupt system and stand up when others would not have done what he did. Him and his wife and his, I think, brother. I mean, most people would have never been able to withstand that.
You know what? That's a great point. And it took so much courage. And as an attorney, and looking back, I wasn't involved in that case at all. But looking back on that, one of the things I think is extremely important in our judicial systems is due process. And due process is really important, especially when you have the federal or state prosecutors and all the weight that they and resources they have geared up against you. It's a really tight spot to be in. And one of the things that I found very disgusting, I think is the right word, is when I found out that the NCIS was actually monitoring the emails from Eddie Gallagher to his attorney.
Right.
And that's really, that's poisoning the whole due process system. They're basically putting a weight on the scale. And it shows how corrupt they were and what they were willing to do, literally, to violate, the sanctity of due process to try to, to get their mark. And so, yep, I was very astounded. One of the things I'm very proud of that we did in the swim in 2019, shortly thereafter he was acquitted, is he came to the swim. And at the end, at the World Trade Center, at the first responder statue, we kind of showed the community, and everybody else where we, the kind of door kicker, stood, because we all gathered around him and we put him front and center. And actually, I gave him my flag at the opening ceremonies, and I put him front and center of everybody with the American flags, because we all had American flags. So right behind the podiums, so everybody could see, Eddie Gallagher's front and center with a group of American Navy SEALs with American flags. And I think that sent a really good message. And also have another guy who's involved in this swim for a couple years named Matt McCabe. And Matt McCabe was similar type of individual where he was involved in a snatch and grab with one of the individuals, terrorist, who was kind of the key organizer for a terrible incident that happened in Fallujah, where they captured a couple contractors and burned them alive and
I
hung them
remember
from a
this.
bridge. And two of those guys were actually former SEALs. And Matt McCabe was involved in a snatch and grab there. And he actually, the terrorists said that Matt beat him up afterwards, which was straight BS. And they were basically, trying to get Matt to roll over and with some type of non-judicial punishment or this or that. But he demanded a court martial and he cleared his name. And so one of the things I do every year that Matt McCabe does to swim as a way to, as attorney, I know how much courage that would have took, because it would have been so easy to just roll over and know you're not going to go to prison or this or that, because that's what the real leverage is. Either you do what we say or you're going to prison. And he said, no, I want court martial and I want to fight for my name.
And I think that this is such a compliment to the Navy SEAL community, because you guys are really setting the example for the rest of the public not to tolerate this. I mean, we now see Bradley Geary, we see Eddie Gallagher, Matt. There are people now that are standing up and are saying, no, this is not the way our judicial system within the United States military ought to work. And by sharing their stories, they're showing that it is possible to fight back. You have to have a very good understanding of media, due process. You have to find the right lawyers. And so there's all these things that do have to fall into place to make this happen. But we've got to educate each other, and we've got to fight back against this, because it's wrong, the ways in which people are getting rolled over if they don't do exactly like you said, what the military says. And it's just a testament to your community that not only are you fighting back, but like Eddie Gallagher, like Bradley Geary, you're telling your story on how you did it and why you did it. And I think that is really important and is set. And like I said, I believe I know that my friends and people that contact me and Francesca from Walk the Talk Foundation, Ryan Sweezy, we're watching you guys really closely, and we're seeing that you're setting the example for the rest of the military, because we're not seeing any other community standing up like this.
Well, sometimes you're going to lose. I tell you the truth. I lost some good friends in Iraq, and I lost some other good friends in Afghanistan. And I think I think about them, like Johnny Foss, Danny Deeds, Nate Hardy, Brian Bill. Like, these guys were friends of mine, and I know that the type of beautiful men they were, and I know that sometimes bad things happen to good people, but I think one of the things is, like, I learned, from them and a lot of my other brothers that I serve with, and my other sisters, warriors like yourself, is, what, sometimes the most important thing, and that's why I think God loved David in the Bible, because David had the courage to fight back, even though when he thought he was going to die. Goliath is a huge giant. Everybody, the whole Israeli army is afraid to step up. David fought back even though he thought he was going to die. And I think that's why God loved him so much. And that's what real courage is. So to be sincere, we're in a real cultural battle here, and we're going to have some losses. But I think the most important thing to do is fight back. And one of the things you were saying, Teresa, kind of reminded me of Leonidas from the famous scenario in Thermopylae with the Spartans. Now, Leonidas and their Spartans, they were actually all killed. And Leonidas actually had his head put on a pike. But his courage emboldened the rest of Greece to rise up. And I think what's happening now is one of the other things I really love about these alternative forms of media, like this great podcast, S.O.S, is that you're able to share these stories. And
Yeah.
so people can learn more about, and hopefully we can have that type of Matt McCabe, Eddie Gallagher, Leonidas type of effect. Like, okay, look, people are standing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're sharing what's going on and how these systems need to change by sharing these stories. And you not only do this, Bill, with this issue with due process, you're doing this, like you said, on a cultural level with a lot of these initiatives that sound wonderful in theory. Like when we hear the word diversity, who doesn't want diversity? Who doesn't want inclusion? Who doesn't want equality? But then when you start to peel the onion back and you see the impacts of what these things are causing, they're much different than the way that they appear at first blush. And I'd like you to go into a little bit about that. We've been on some webinars together where you've described that. And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't until my talk with Chase Spears on this issue. He's a former Army PAO, a good friend of mine. And him and I had kind of disagreed on this for a while, but I got him on the show. And I never saw this issue the same way anymore after that conversation.
Yeah. Well, I believe diversity is extremely important. But I believe real diversity includes diversity of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that's happened is that's been lost. I don't think there's any greater diversity than diversity of thought. The other thing is when I think about like Martin Luther King, I think the greatest takeaway I have from him is judge a person by the content of their character. And I think that's what really is important. Now, one of the issues that I have with a lot of these different D&I type of programs, it's a lot of it's corruption. A lot of it is not really based on diversity. It's really based on promoting woke ideology, and a lot of it is also based on cronyism and nepotism. And it's actually some of it is based on racism against white Americans or
And what is your
homosexuals.
definition of woke? Because everybody seems to have a different definition. So when you say woke, what are we talking about?
When I say woke, policies that are strictly geared towards one, diversity strictly on racial makeup, policies that are based on changes, ideological changes as far as how you refer to gender and sexuality, where basically there are almost extreme positions. There's not any room for debate or moderation.
No.
And to me,
And they're
that's
not based on merit. They have nothing to do with merit.
no, well, and here's the real issue, because a lot of the seed of this has grown from our universities, and then it spread out to our lower educational systems. But in our elite universities is really where this blossomed. And what happens when that's the recruiting grounds for leadership in our country and corporate America. And what happens when you believe you're morally correct and you're intellectually correct, you really don't need to debate. And so what happens is they're emboldened, and that's where a lot of this cancel culture really, in my opinion, originated from, because they felt they're morally and intellectually superior, so they can cancel everything else. It doesn't matter. Their way is the right way, and it's a form of absolutism, And it's like, you can see it. I've felt it and seen it in the legal community, and in New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, and PA. It's at extreme levels where you're basically excluded and isolated if you don't kind of bend a knee to it. And unfortunately, it's happened into the military community as well, at least in the leadership branches. And it's I think one of the greatest factors that's helped in this kind of ideological and type of cultural debate that our nation and actually our planet is currently engaging in, because it's much broader than just our country. That similar kind of debates are raging out throughout the planet.
Oh yeah, it's
And,
all over the UK.
yeah, well, UK kind of made a great mistake in some ways, and it's one of the things that happened. So when your ideas are so bad that you need to let in foreigners in to try to help recompensate some of those votes because you lost them because of poor ideologies, corruption, and poor policies, and you don't properly vet, then you're going to have problems. And you saw one of the small symptoms of that in the incident in the subway where that poor lady was burned to death by an illegal immigrant who wasn't properly vetted. They'll open up the border because they want the votes, or they open up the border in the name of diversity. Well, diversity is okay, right? I don't have a problem with diversity, but I do believe we should properly vet people who are coming in. And if you're going to ask for my ID when I go to fly, if I'm, shouldn't you,
Yeah.
shouldn't you vet who's going to come across the border? Or if you're worried about COVID and you're mandating that I get a vaccine or I lose my job, shouldn't you, for the safety of all of us, shouldn't you vet who comes across the border? The truth is, the woke ideology that's infested the leadership in the Democratic Party and took a big hit this election was they were more really about power. That's why they opened up the borders. They were about power. If they cared about us, they wouldn't open up the borders like they did. And so, to me, that's why these alternative forms of media are so important, like these podcasts, because me and you, just regular people, I don't have two pennies to my name. I can give my ideas. You can give your ideas, and
Yeah.
it's unfiltered. They can't, they can try to cancel us. I
And they
can't.
do. They do.
That's true. And was recently canceled from YouTube,
Hmm.
and I appealed twice and got denied. And then the truth is, I had reached out to some of my friends that are Israelis, and I reached out to the Trump administration. I got some people involved in the Trump transition team, and I got some contact information for leadership in YouTube. And I basically showed that my stuff shouldn't have been terminated. Now I'm not gonna give the information of the people that I've reached out to, but they were extremely high level. And so what I can say is that not everybody has that right. Now,
Yeah.
one of the things when you talk about the cancel culture, and one of the real issues that I have with the woke ideology, and they'll do anything and everything to retain power. And that's really what happened when you look. I'm an attorney, and I honestly believe there's been no greater threat to our democracy process than basically politically corrupt attorneys and federal prosecutors and state prosecutors. Because I think they thoroughly tried to subvert the preamble of the Constitution, we the people, to decide who we want to be elected, right? And all these different bar associations, all these big law firms, they were asleep at the wheel. No one was saying, "Hey, look, what is going on here? You can't try to prosecute your political opponents." And that's exactly what happened. And then you wanted the other big thing, right? Look at all these cases that came up when Elon Musk he put out the Twitter files, and it showed that all this communication and organization and coordination between federal authorities and members of Twitter and how they were coordinating in suppressing stories, like trying to suppress their Hunter Biden laptop story right before an election, or shutting down. I can't tell you how many of my friends that are SEALs that were very outspoken about the COVID mandates, and they were using social media, and some of them had huge followings on Instagram and Facebook, and they were speaking out against the COVID mandates, and their platforms got shut down, and that really hurt their business. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, free speech, equality. Like, how can you have that if you don't have free speech? And all those judges, all those appeal judges and their circuit judges. And so in order to hold free speech doesn't apply to private entities unless they can show joint activity. There's got to be a nexus, but joint activity, a bridge between the federal government and the private entities. The Twitter file showed there was. And there was a lot of cases that came up and they got shut down because the judges said, oh, they couldn't see joint activity. Well, in my opinion, those judges are in on it. All right. Because there's absolutely joint activity with Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, YouTube, all those accounts they shut down. And all those voices of Americans they shut down for political reasons, motivated reasons. And, they're all going to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring. Look, I hope Trump remembers when they shut him down. He had billions of followers and they tried to stop his reach. I hope he holds them accountable. I hope they do federal investigations because it's a huge, huge suppression of American opinions and voices. Right now,
I agree, Bill.
It was
100%
horrible.
agree with you.
It was horrible.
And I mean, and this goes for both sides. I think I shared a video with you earlier, and I didn't agree with what the person in the video was saying, but then I was like thinking about it a few minutes later, and I'm like, but that's his right to say that stuff. I would never in a million years suggest that this gentleman be canceled, be censored, be his reach get decreased. I want to hear from all sides. I welcome all sides to my podcast. I have friends who are very far on the left. I have friends who are more like me, probably right of center. I have people like you that are probably a little more right of center. And I want all of those views because, as you said, in the marketplace of ideas, if we can hear all those views in an open and honest forum, the best decisions will happen and the most logical conclusions will be reached. And we will not get to that if we only can hear one side of the story.
That's right. I can just tell from my personal experience in life, there have been plenty of times where I thought my perspective was right, and then I get
new information,
more information, or, I just changed. I think differently now, than when I was 20 years old.
Of course.
And so, you're so right. Like, look, let the people weigh it out. And I tell you this, whenever there's any type of, there's a couple things. Whenever there's any type of organization that's promoting like racial divide, I'm like, they're doing it for power most of the time. Like,
right.
They're trying to manipulate the populace, most of the time. Or like, whenever they're trying to shut down a voice, I'm like, most of the time, they're doing it for power. Like, and so, it raises my concern.
Yeah. And Doug Carey, he's on the call and he said, yeah, that's a big problem with our country today, Teresa. People won't listen to each other if they don't agree and they will muck up the thinking. And it's so true. In fact, to the credit of the two panelists, I just watched a show with Matt Walsh and I forget her name, but she's that fitness lady from The Biggest Loser. I can't remember her name. If you said it, I'd know it, but she's a lesbian. She's very muscular and fit, and she's become a Republican recently, but they were debating gay marriage. And of course, she's a proponent of gay marriage. And he, Matt Walsh is, anti-gay marriage, only believes in marriage between a man and a woman. But what was so impressive, Jillian Michaels, but what was so impressive about the debate, if you watch it on YouTube, is that they radically disagree, but they don't fight. They don't argue. They don't get personal. The same thing happened with Matt Walsh and Joe Rogan. They had a podcast together where they radically disagreed on certain things. And Matt Walsh holds his own. And so does Joe Rogan. And it's so wonderful to hear two people with opposing views having a respectful conversation. It can happen, and it should happen.
Yes.
So that's just what I want to see us get back to. And I'm hopeful come January. I'm hopeful that we can stop, like you said, with this massive division. I see these these DEI initiatives. And at first, I taught extremism training for my command 2 commands ago. And I brought in a hate crimes expert. I took it over and just decided I hated all the training material and I was just going to teach it my way. So I brought in a guy from a hate crimes division of the Norfolk Police Department, some guy from the NCIS, and we had a really good discussion about bullying, about toxic work behavior. But I've always felt, and I could be completely wrong, but I've always felt that it's more about power and about bullying than it is about skin color, than it is about culture. And so when you look at it from that lens, yes, we should be having these conversations and we should be exposing this behavior. But to paint it in this broad brush that it's always about race and it's always about religion and it's always about these other things, these affinities, I just don't buy it after the years that I've been alive. I really do believe it's more of a power struggle between two people or a group.
I agree too. And I also think there's some real negative side effects to it. And that's one of the things I'm very concerned with. Now, there was a case called Brown v. Board of Education. And there was and that was a Supreme Court case. An initial previous Supreme Court case was this Dred Scott case. And in the Dred Scott case, they basically did, and basically the argument was, can they have school systems or different state institutions divided by race? And in Dred Scott, they said yes, but separate but equal. And
Right.
basically, and Brown v. Board, they said no. And one of the reasonings they said no is they said, look, you're creating this superior mental type of disorder with Black children because it's not separate but equal, and you're creating this this like, in my word, like they're like coding these kids to have like this mental disorder where they don't believe that they're mentally equal, and it's a horrible thing. And I totally agree with the court's reasoning there. Now, my opinion now is I believe what they're doing with like critical race theory that's being pushed is doing the same thing, but to white children now. Because now it's almost like they're being taught that they're
I never thought about
inherently
it like that.
evil people, or just because they're white, they're bad people. Now that I'm very concerned with that. I remember I went to a Rutgers University library, and my girlfriend pointed it out to me. And all like so many prominent positions, they had all these books, and some of the titles, it was so like in your face, and I was very kind of concerned with what Rutgers was doing, because this is where all the Rutgers students, young, very influential young kids there, and this is being pushed on them in a big way. And so I'm very concerned with it. And that's one of the other things the Trump administration, the true root to this. That's funny. On the other podcast, they were talking about different leverages we could have on different foreign adversaries. And one of the things I said is, we used the example set by the Mossad and how they tapped into Hezbollah's supply chain for leverage, right? And I want to promote a similar type of concept here, is I really think the federal government under the Trump administration has a lot of leverage by tapping into these federal grants for these universities and colleges. Really need to go after the CRT. It has to go. Like, and if you got professors out of there that are like off the wall, like they got to go. And because they're creating a lot of damage, because it's really psychological damage. And if you want to go into like the history of it and delve deep into it, the truth is, unfortunately, it's that type of horrible behavior has been a repetitive pattern throughout humankind recorded times, for every race, for every ethnic group, for every religious group. Unfortunately, it's not just limited to white males and females and English settlers into the colonies. It's just unfortunately repeated pattern throughout history. And so to label one racial group within our nation that's not the right way.
No, it's not helpful. It's not helpful to bring us together. It's not helpful to unite us. And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't hold up to scrutiny when you follow the tracks of where it's going to lead. And then what it also does to people, and I believe one of the other harmful impacts of DEI is that it creates a victim mentality in the people who are the marginalized group that's being discriminated against. Because if you think that you can't escape the tyranny of the white man, then you're not going to rise up. You're just going to go, well, I'm doomed from the beginning. I saw a really good episode with Charlie Kirk. So Charlie Kirk, I'm sure you're familiar with this, during the election, he went on college campuses, and you can go on YouTube and you can see where he debates most of these people that, as you say, have been infected with the woke mind virus, which I really like that way of seeing it. It's definitely what it is. And he debates them openly and goes back and forth, and he gives them a chance to talk. He lets them bring out their points. But every single time he debunks some of their basic understanding about why things are the way they are. And one example that I found really fascinating is, well, why are Black people predominantly mostly in poverty compared to other races, and one of his arguments that he posits or positions is that the Black man has been eliminated in favor of the welfare state, where single mothers have been more dependent on welfare than keeping Black fathers with Black mothers. And that's not what is promoted or what is celebrated in their community, or is not shamed. Now, I know I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for saying all this, but again, and it's a Charlie Kirk episode, but it was just fascinating how he lays out that argument. And I'm probably not repeating it in the most correct or politically correct way, but it's just another way of looking at that situation. Like, when you're dependent upon the state, and that's what he's basically saying, is that a lot of these people who live in poverty, and this could go for white people too, I'm not trying to be pigeonhole, but the question and the discussion in the podcast was about, well, why are so many Black children raised without a father, and why are they predominantly the ones ending up in the criminal justice system and things like that. And it's just a piece of the puzzle that I never thought of, is that by creating welfare and by not creating incentives to work, what you're doing is you're sticking people in a cycle that they just can't get out of, because it's all they know. And I thought that was fascinating.
Well, I think you've raised some good points there. And I look at a lot of things, and a lot of actions that happen a lot of times have different variable influences, not just one.
Right.
And I think one of the things is a lot of exploitation and a lot of different things. And one, you can look at the criminal justice system, and then I think there was some big exploitations there. Or you can even look at some of the music industry and some of the type of music that was promoting.
He brought up that too, about the gangster rap music, and the fact that a lot of that music is actually promoting that lifestyle.
That's right. Well, you look at, we all have different influences in life, and we're at different times, where it's like frequencies. Sometimes the things are up, sometimes they're down, waves. And in life, sometimes we're more vulnerable to different influences. And unfortunately, when you're younger,
yeah, you're more vulnerable.
and and so I think that had a huge impact. One of the things I like now is that I think it's you can see about the popularity of Elon Musk. It's cool to be a tech guy.
A scientist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's great.
Yeah. And I think across the board now, our society has changed so much in just in short period of time. And I think, I think so many more of us are really valuing, it's not just education, but, to be more advanced. And when I really think what like my goal is in life is I try to make myself as good as I can be. I try to self-improve. That's really my goal. I want to have a positive impact on humanity. I want to improve. That's now the truth is I'm a warrior, like 100% I'm a warrior. I didn't become a SEAL because I'm not. And so the truth is I am kind of looking for, a good place where I can kind of get engaged for a good cause. And I think right now is a good time because the whole, our nation's kind of in this big cultural debate right now. And this big election, this last election, it was like a big wake up call. But I do think, and this is a message I'm putting out there to leadership in the Republican Party. Initially, I wasn't in favor of J.D. Vance, even though he's a Marine veteran, because I thought initially that look, we needed to because I believe it's really about ideas. And that's real. And I thought we need our ideas to really reach into a more diverse market, right? And I was like, if he picked somebody who is, not, and it's so funny. I'm so against DEI and all that racial stuff. But in this one situation, I would think if he picked somebody who was black or female or Latino or Asian, it would maybe help reach a real market place that
Yeah.
at least the ideas that I support, and a lot of conservative ideas. I used to be a Democrat, believe it or not, but they went wacko, so I couldn't stay on that ship anymore. So what happened was, but and but what so I thought JD Vance hit the investment in him played out well during the debate. Because one of the things I think a lot of the intellectuals and the Democratic Party is I thought a lot of them, at least in my opinion, because I was at a law firm, and in my opinion, a big law firm, they were an air of arrogance, and they really believed that they were intellectually superior, and it's extremely pompous. And so one of the things that I thought JD Vance did, and it's the same thing with having Elon Musk, and Vivek, is that they showed that these guys are sharp. This is a sharp team here.
Yeah.
But my mess. So I think that's real currency and ideas, because if you look at the debate, Watts just got, he got thrown around there. But what I think that here's my real message to the leadership in the GOP. We might have won this battle, and it was a big battle this election. But the truth is, in order to get our country steered around, we really have to reach out to a more diverse audience. And I don't believe that's by, the BS type of like bribery that the
No.
Democrats used to do, or trying to play on racial division, and some shitbag cop does something, so you want to paint all the police as a racist so you can rile up your base before an election. Like, I don't think that's the right way. I think the right way is, look, you know, uh, there's plenty of, I think the tide's changing a little bit, and I really think we need to maximize it.
Well,
Yep.
I was just going to say, I think we need to get more Charlie Kirks. I mean, if you just watch that guy, I mean, his facts, his grasp of argument and debate is impressive. And if we could identify people that can speak on their feet as quickly as he can to go on college campuses and have these kinds of discussions. I mean, there's several videos on YouTube where you watch, and there was one that I really love where he's in a circle with all people that are very, DEI or woke, and they can only argue as long as the people who are watching allow. So if they get enough people that say we're done, we don't want to hear this anymore, they have to stop. So both sides have to make their argument so crisp, so clear, so to the point. And it's just fascinating to watch that kind of discussion in real time, because I think that's what's really going to help convince people is if they are able to be heard and they're able to put forth how they feel about these issues. Because a lot of times people, as we all do, I do it, and I know you do it, Bill, we bring our own biases and our own hurts and our own past traumas into these discussions. And we're basing it on our own personal experience sometimes, and not necessarily on what's really happening strategically. Uh, and so people, of course, who have been just felt discriminated against, or they've felt bullied, or they've felt marginalized. So of course they want to support DEI because they think that it's going to give them this sense of equality, or they see the first, African-American 2-star, or they see the first female combat pilot, or they see these things and they say, wow, that's so cool. And it is so cool.
It's cool.
But it should not be at the expense of merit. It shouldn't. And as long as it is not in a place where it's, oh, we've just made this person so that they could be the first, then I think it's wonderful. And that's how we are going to reach those people. But we can't reach those people if they're being pushed to the front of the line because of an affirmative action policy, because that's just going to hold them back even more.
Well, one of the things you can't, the forms that you just described, where people can have a chance to really kind of evaluate a different perspective. That doesn't happen on a lot of these college campuses. At Rutgers, I've seen videos where they throw red paint on people, they intimidate, they have crowds of people outside, or it's just it's really a huge intimidation process. I honestly believe, you can look at a lot of the Hamas protests and things like that. Freedom of speech on a lot of college campuses doesn't really exist. And I think that's one of the big issues that, we were talking about leverage that we need with these federal grants.
Yeah.
That they feed off of. Like, that has to change.
Yeah. And now I want to transition to, I definitely want to get to before the end of the call, because we've just spent so much time on this fascinating issue that I'm just deepening into. I will say that even just in this past, I'd say couple months, I've changed how I see the DEI issue. And that has been a big revelation for me, because I was like everybody else, where I just thought, this is great, this is inclusive, but when I really dug deeper into these issues, I realized how divisive they are, and how they're not really serving the people that they say they're serving. And by marginalizing, like you say, white men or white women, or making us feel like we're privileged just because of the color of our skin, that's not helpful. That's not helpful to bring us together and to unite us. But what I also want to talk about, and this is also very encouraging, is the fact that we have a prospective SecDef who is a reformer, is a change agent, has battled media what I would call smears, has battled media smears like I've never seen for a Department of Defense nominee. And can you tell us a little bit, Bill, about why you're supporting Pete?
Well, I'm supporting Pete because number one, I just gotta be honest with you guys. We live, as far as a threat environment, it's a more dangerous threat environment now than we've ever faced. There's so many different nations out there and proxies out there, and the technology that they have capable access to I know, like when I was doing CQC and I'm coming in houses, it's all about the different angles,
I'm putting you on full screen so you can explain a little better.
And so one of the big issues is the more angles you can't cover, the higher the risk is, And so right now there's just so many angles out there across the theater, across the planet. And you can't have a military that's not focused on combat efficiency, because in warfare, there's no second place. And unfortunately, I love humanity. I love technology. I want us, there's so many things that with technology that we could do and achieve. And it's great to have somebody like Elon Musk kind of with the big bullhorn and the ability to kind of promote humanity. But one of the great dangers with the technology we have, and to be sincere, there's a lot of nations out there with and intelligence agencies with backwards type of ideology, but with the capabilities that they have that could cause us severe harm. And so we need to tighten our ship up. And the military, unfortunately, the Pentagon, I mean, there's a huge corruption problem. When you have, you give trillions of dollars of military equipment to the enemy, there's something happened there. There needs to be a congressional investigation. There should, bank accounts should be subpoenaed, emails, text messages, something, there's a problem in the Pentagon. Something happened there. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
When you have a spy balloon that overtly is going over some of our most sensitive military installations and it doesn't get shot down until after it goes over the entire country, like something's wrong in the Pentagon.
Bill, have you ever thought about like what their end game is? Like, I know you've said in other shows that you think that it's possibly the left, or not the left, but the Democratic Party or what have you, the Biden administration has been compromised. If they've been compromised, why? That's the part that I always like to go one step further and say, okay, if that's the case and they've been compromised, what is in it for them to destroy our nation? Like, why?
Well, I think, so kind of like my answer before, there's a lot of different variables that have an influence. I think the biggest influence likely would be short-term monetary gain.
Sure.
You can look at, think about Biden, the couple $1 million he received from Burisma, right? And that was the Ukrainian company. But that he sat on the board of directors. I believe it was an energy company. And we gave over hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. The U.S. Department of State website reports we gave them $61.4 billion. So we gave them billions of dollars. So it's short-term monetary gain, I imagine, likely for some of this. I think there's a variable of other reasons. Some of it might be ideological, but they're absolutely putting us at risk and not having the best interest of our nation, like 100%. Some of the stuff that happened. So I actually became really concerned with the Pentagon leadership because I was in Iraq in 2004, 2005. That's the first time women voted there. And a lot of us really believed that we were going to turn things around there. And the way the complete power vacuum they left in 2009, and to be honest with you, it's likely that some of our foreign agencies helped support initially some of the Sunni militant jihadist organizations tied to ISIS initially to combat some of the Iranian influence. But the horrors that they committed there and the power vacuum, and it's not like you couldn't see it, that's what would happen. I became alarmed when I saw what happened in Afghanistan and that shameful withdrawal and what happened to all those Afghanistans who went up to bat to try to have a better life. And they got tortured and hunted down and killed. And all the trillions of dollars left, look, all the generals and admirals all the tier leadership that bent a knee or were silent to the woke ideology, that put us at risk.
Yeah.
When you look, you fail 7 budgets, you can't account for $824 million in military assets. There's all types of corruption going on there and different programs. This whole issue with, you're going to retire and then you're going to get a business, with some consulting firm. Something's wrong. Something's wrong.
And I think the part that, Stu Scheller talks about this all the time, and because him and I, when he spoke out, the only thing that I objected to about him, very courageous. He did it a little bit saltier than I would suggest with the some of the personal attacks and wearing the uniform. And he knows, him and I have gone back and forth about that. And I understand why he did it. He would never have gotten the attention or the reach if he hadn't done it that way. So I understand it. But one of his points that has really stuck with me is I said to him, well, these generals and these admirals, they just follow orders. They just do what Congress and the president want them to do. And he said, but Teresa, they could have put their retirement, they could have put their jobs on the line to speak up and to speak out and to say something, and none of them did it. And that has just really, as I really think about it, Stu Scheller's the only one who did that. He put his job, he put his retirement, his marriage, was probably already ending, but was, the straw that broke the camel's back was that. Everything in his whole life was uprooted because of that single decision that he made and how passionate he was about that cause. And there's a lot to be said for that. No matter how you feel about the way he did it or some of the ways he could have done it better or whatever, there's so much to be said about that. And I remember when he was going through all this, I was in touch with him. And that's what his big point was, is that there were so many general officers that were involved in that withdrawal and who didn't agree with the way it was going down. And we'll tell you in Congress and all these different hearings later on down the road that they objected to it and didn't agree with the way it was being conducted. But if they really didn't agree with it and they knew lives were going to get lost and they knew it was going to be disastrous, why didn't just one of them say, nope, I've already got millions of dollars saved up. I've got my investments. I'll work in the nonprofit sector later. Just very, very similar to like what the Theodore Roosevelt, I think it was, that had the COVID issue. And you had I've had him on my podcast, and his Brett Crozier. He said, you know what? I think my troops are going to die. We don't know about COVID. We don't understand the extent of where this is going to lead. And I need to protect my crew. And so he laid his rank down on the line and laid his job on the line and said, this is what I got to do for the well-being and the safety of my crew. And it just makes me sick. It really does. Now I'm starting to get fired up about this. That's just not one person that was involved in these decisions that were in the planning room when this was happening has ever spoken up about it and said this was bullshit the way this went down. Why?
It's crazy. I tell you the truth. There's times when I should have stepped up when I didn't. And I try to use those experiences in my life to motivate me to speak up now. Stu was a champion. He stood up. And, sometimes when he stood up, it was so obvious to everybody else. It was so clear. What we lack now is we lack accountability. None of those generals were fired. None of those admirals were fired. That's going to change. They're going to get fired. And I'm asking for congressional investigations. I want more than that, because you're not going to deter this type of behavior, unless there's accountability.
And you're not going to get the kind of leaders that will stand up and will speak out and will be dynamic and will be what I believe this administration wants. One thing I highly recommend everybody watch, I did. And it was on X, and I can't remember. I don't think it may have been called The Art of the Steal, but I forget. It's a documentary about Trump's campaign. And it's really good because you start to see the man behind the spin, and you see his staffers, you see the way he works and the way he allows people to fail. He's not this "you're fired" guy. I think at one point his sound guy just totally got the teleprompter wrong or, something like that. But, and you see what happened when he got shot. And it was just a fascinating read into the kind of leader that I believe Trump is. And I guess I'm unapologetic about how I feel about that. But yeah. I watched every episode, and again, I know it's a documentary, it can be edited however it wants, but you get a sense for what people feel working for him, and you get a sense of what he brings to the table and why he decided to run. He didn't have to run. He didn't have to, at the age in his 70s, say, okay, I'm going to run the country one more time. But he felt that we were in such a place that was what he needed to do. And there's a lot to be said for that.
You're right. And you know what? He came pretty close to getting killed a couple of times and getting put in prison, bankrupt. You look what they did to Giuliani. Now, the way he brought our country together, New York City together after 9/11, and what they did to him. So they're vicious. They're vicious. They're trying to destroy your life. And that's why the cancel culture was so real. There's so many beautiful people out there. I can tell you, at my last law firm, I had people coming up in the elevators telling me they're with me. People in the hallways telling me
I'm
they're
sure.
with me. And so a lot of people were it's just like when Stu stood up and he was very courageous. And when everybody knew he was right,
Yep.
everybody.
Nobody debated his message.
No.
Nobody. Because there wasn't anything anybody could say. We all were watching people dropping from the planes. In fact, I have a friend, a public affairs officer, who was there at the airport, and he confirmed everything that we read in the papers and how bad it was.
You know what?
And I had Scott Mann on the show. He told me how bad it was.
You know what bothers me? The Taliban is brutal. I mean, brutal. And they're using American military gear to brutalize people, to either submit to their ideology or die.
And they're still being paid by the U.S. government. There's a whole Sean Ryan show that goes into that.
It's a fucking disgrace.
Yeah, I hear you. So now there's a new cause to make sure that Pete Hegseth becomes our new SecDef, and to really understand these smear campaigns from anonymous sources that have not come forward, and that fact that we have seen our legacy media just run with stories without any verification or any proper fact checking. And Bill, tell us a little bit about what you're doing. I believe it's mid-January to take a stand on this issue.
So one of the things I learned that it's never over. It's never over. And don't ever get complacent, because that's when you're going to get hit. And so they're doing everything and anything they possibly can to retain power. You saw what they did with Wokefare. That's the slander campaign. You saw what they did with Lawfare, where they try to use these lawyers to put you in jail and bankrupt you. Have no doubt that they're trying to do everything and anything possible to try to influence these senators. Under the table, over the table, blackmail, everything and anything they can do to retain power. The Pentagon is a huge institution, and there's a lot of different spheres of influence at play here that are targeting Pete. And so one of the things I'm doing with a couple other SEALs is we're organizing a march on January 14th, and we're going to meet at 9 a.m. at the Vietnam War Memorial. We're going to carry American flags. SEALs don't march with anything else but American flags. So if you see somebody carrying some other flag, it ain't us. SEALs, we're proud of who we are. We're not wearing masks. We want everybody to know that who we are and where we stand. So if you see anybody wearing a mask, they're not with us. That's not who we are. We served our country with honor, and we're going to exercise our First Amendment right to free speech and free assembly with honor. So I encourage everybody who believes that we live in dangerous times now. We need our military to refocus so they can be there when we need it. So we're strongly supporting Pete. We want to send a visual message for everybody to see. We're going to be the adults in the room. And so when at the Senate hearings, which are on the 14th, there'll be 1,000 people or so. We'll be there putting the permanent applications in, drafted it all up today with a good team. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to exercise our right to free speech and free assembly. And we're going to show our nation, the warrior class, and that we stand with Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense.
I love it. I love it. And it's a wonderful way to get involved, and anybody can get involved. I'm talking to you, active duty members. You do not lose your First Amendment right to off duty be a citizen. So
don't wear your uniform.
No.
And here's the truth. I promise you, we will follow Martin Luther King Jr.'s example. We will hold the moral high ground. We're not going to let anyone discredit our message. So you have no doubt, if you want to come and support us, we're going to do it with honor.
I love it. All right, Bill, I think we're nearing the end of the call. We didn't even really talk too much about the New York City Swim. Tell us just a little bit about that before we wrap up, because I want to have an opportunity for you to talk about that. as well.
And New York City SEAL Swim is a pretty cool event. We get a bunch of SEALs and other patriots and veterans, police officers and firefighters. We all swim to the Statue of Liberty. We do 100 push-ups, 22 pull-ups for our nation's freedoms and civil liberties. Pop back in the water, swim to Ellis Island, do 100 push-ups, 22 pull-ups to honor all the men and women who came to our country for a better life, honor our nation's diversity. Pop back in the water, swim to the lower Manhattan. We'll get the South Cove Marina, get a bunch of American flags, hold them real high, run into the World Trade Center, Ground Zero, PAPD, FDNY, Pipers are playing for us. And then we're going to do 100 push-ups, 22 pull-ups to honor all those lost in 9/11 and honor our nation's men and women who put it on the line for our country. It's a great event. Fox News covers. Pete Hegseth did it with us. Raises a lot of money for the Navy SEAL Foundation and good work they do for our Gold Stars, SEALs, and their families. It's a great time. Looks like it'll be August 9th this year. Dates not set in stone yet. Still kind of waiting on the tides and currents a little bit. There's a couple other dates. I try to get it as close as I can to August 6th, the anniversary of Extortion 17, where the SEAL community took a hard hit, to honor our brothers lost that day.
I love it. And you've been doing this for years. Yeah, you can look it up online. There's all kinds of videos and other media coverage about it. It's a wonderful fundraiser. My dear friend Suzanne Lesko participated. So did Dave Sanderson. So I had heard of this before you and I met, and so she had told me she had done it, and I thought it was an amazing
big
event.
hitter. Suzanne, a fascinating female veteran advocate. She does a lot of great work. I love her. Dave Sanders, the last guy off this ship that crashed in the Hudson. I mean, the airplane that crashed in the Hudson. Two fantastic people, and honored to have them with us. Yes.
All right, Bill. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the Stories of Service podcast. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you or you'd like to add before we close out the call?
Hey, I'm involved in I just filed a lawsuit against my old law firm, McCarter and English. I felt the way I was treated there was extremely horrible. And I think it's important. We talked about Eddie Gallagher. We talked about Matt McCabe. We talked about Stu Steller. I think it's important to speak up. And just like David going against Goliath, or even Leonidas, going against the Persians there, speaking up and getting engaged, sometimes it can embolden others. And so that's really what I'm about. That's what I'm trying to be about. And, actions speak louder than words.
Wonderful. And we did have a couple questions. I'll just get to them in the call so that we don't have to get to them later. We had Varsha from India. He just said, can this event, he's talking about the New York City Swim, be supported intercontinental for the Brave SEALs? Would love to support from India.
Well, I tell you what, we would love to have any of India swimmers. We would love to have you guys or gals with us. And you guys can, the Navy SEAL Foundation will be on their website. You guys can support that way. But yeah, we'd love to have you guys with us in the water. It'd be awesome.
Yeah. And then Mike Cantwell just says hello. He's a wonderful patriot himself and is doing a lot with election reform. So thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go full screen on my end, but I will meet you backstage. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for this special holiday episode. I wasn't even going to do a podcast this week, but Bill and I got to know each other this past couple of weeks, and I just knew that this event with Pete Hegseth and just some of the advocacy that he's doing was just too important not to do a show. So I am doing another one. Next week, I'm going to come at you with a woman who I met on a cruise ship, actually, a Virgin cruise ship, and she runs a blog called Suitcase and a Smile, and she is financially independent, started at age 43, and is now a full-time traveler and just hops from country to country and blogs about it along the way. So a little bit lighthearted episode, but I think it's going to be an amazing story about taking ownership of your choices, empowerment, and being able to do what you want when you want with your free time. So can't wait to have her on. And as I always say to close out these calls, well, for one, Happy New Year, Merry Christmas. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Bye-bye now.